Are you ready? It's time to laugh, to win, and to live the thrill of the action.
Hey, baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. What the hell's going on out here?
No idea what's going on, but I am excited.
Every pick, every play, every game-changing moment.
Unbelievable!
This is You Better You Bet, brought to you by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
And it is a great day to be alive on Westwood One Sports. Oh, yeah, summertime is here. We got people running around like maniacs, drinking their faces off, doing who knows what else, celebrating championships. Or like I did with friends as we went out of town this past weekend, just celebrating the fact that, well, why the hell not celebrate? In New York, in Raleigh, celebrations will be had later this week. A New York Knicks parade through the Canyon of Champions going to happen on Thursday. In Raleigh on Saturday, the Carolina Hurricanes will continue what I'm sure has already started, a days-long, if not weeks-long binge where you eat anything you can find out of the top of the Stanley Cup and drink many things out of it as well. Got the World Cup going on, some surprise draws. Sister kissing. Nobody likes it. We've got baseball in the thick of things as we've pushed beyond Memorial Day and, like I said, well into the summer. We got the College World Series. We got the NBA draft a week away. And we've got guys deciding to pull the plug on their efforts to continue fighting the law, even though the law seemed to be on their side. We'll break it all down. There's a lot to get to. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today here on You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM, live on Westwood One Sports. Inside the Westwood One Sports app, take it with you. You can also find us on the Odyssey app as well, AUDACY, and we are live across North America on Sirius XM channel 375. A lot of page turning today. And I don't mean necessarily in how you get caught up in a good book. Does anyone actually read books with real pages anymore? I realize I have some on the shelf behind me here, which you can see if you're watching the stream on YouTube, youtube.com/@thekostos, THEKOSTOS, still live there. Checking out your comments in the chat, even though Nick is off. I realize there is a shelf full of books behind me. And I've read, I'd say probably 90% of those books and actually turned the pages. But does anybody do that anymore? Does everybody have like the ebook, the audio book? Nobody really turns pages of a good book anymore, do they? I don't know. We'll be turning a different page as we go from the end of some seasons to the beginning of others. As in the end of the NBA season into the off season, which is now firmly underway. Brian Geltzeiler of Sirius XM NBA Radio is going to join us in about an hour and 20 minutes, right around 10:25 a.m. Eastern, 7:25 Pacific, to talk about a lot of different things. Both the draft, which I mentioned is a week away, but also the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes. Sounds like things may be down to a couple of teams. And it's now up to Giannis where he wants to go. Is it Miami? Is it Boston? Is there another team that may be involved? We'll get it all from Geltz, like I said, in a little bit more than an hour and 20 minutes from now. In the third and final hour, the power hour here on You Better You Bet, we will start to turn the page from the end of the NHL season to the off season with the draft, with free agency, all right out there on the horizon, and everyone trying to figure out what Carolina did right and whether they can do it. We'll talk to Dennis Bernstein of Sirius XM NHL Radio and the fourth period. That coming up around 11:20 Eastern, 8:20 Pacific. Also, the U.S. Open is this weekend at Shinnecock. So Jason Sobel will join us for a comprehensive preview of that at the top of the next hour, 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific. Jason of Sirius XM PGA Tour Radio and CBS Sports HQ, as well as BetMGM. What exactly are we looking for at Shinnecock? We know it's going to play fast, especially on the greens. We know how much the wind can impact things. Who do we like? Who should we keep an eye on? All of that with Jason at the top of the hour. But the 5 biggest stories of the day, I like to get them to you right off the top of the show so you know exactly what the lay of the land is as we get started here on You Better You Bet. It's time for the high 5.
5.
A Big 12 federal filing on Monday morning, with which the league basically asked the federal judge for the authority to invoke its own rules. The Big 12 made very clear today in a statement by its board that they felt like athletes who bet on college sports on their own team should not be able to play college sports.
Pete Thamel on ESPN yesterday, I believe that was last night, I saw, as he was explaining the next turn, maybe the final turn in the Brendan Sorsby saga, as it sounds like he'll now apply for the NFL's supplemental draft. We can get into the mechanics of that and how it works a little bit later, because it's not a draft in the traditional sense that you're thinking of. We'll get to that. By the way, just 12 more Sundays without football. Just 12 more Sundays without NFL football. So we are inching ever closer to being back. Brendan Sorsby, though, will not be back in Lubbock, will not be back at Texas Tech. He never really, he officially was, but never played a game for them. Sorsby will get to keep some of the NIL money that he got in Lubbock. And Texas Tech, for what it's worth, continues, they say, to support him in this journey. But the journey will take him to the NFL now, because nobody wanted to be the adult in the room. That's what this boils down to. The NCAA, they didn't want to be the adults in the room. Judges, both of the federal and state variety, didn't want to be the adults in the room. No one wanted to be that parent who tells the teenager, hey, Billy, or in this case, Brendan, you can't do that and not face consequences. And look, I understand his personal life. He may be facing consequences, and I do have empathy for those struggling with some sort of addiction, of any kind of addiction. I do. But let's be honest. Addicts make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, you have to pay the consequences for those mistakes. And this all boiled down to nobody, up until the Big 12, tried putting their foot down. Like, they didn't stomp it down on the floor. The Big 12 just lightly placed their foot on the floor, loudly enough that you wouldn't even hear it if you were downstairs. Like, okay, our foot's on the floor now. The Big 12 did that. And ADs around the Big 12 said, and deans and boards of regents and whatever other people with important titles said, yeah, we're not going to let this happen easily. If we got to keep going back to court over and over and over again, we'll do it. We'll do whatever it takes so that somebody finally has to be the adult in the room. And Brendan Sorsby finally read that room and said, okay, yeah, you know what? My deadline for entering the NFL supplemental draft is next week. I should probably make sure I get that done. And who knows how long these legal battles are going to continue to drag out. So let's just go pro. Let's do it. Let's enter the NFL supplemental draft. And in just a couple minutes, we will, like I said, get into what that looks like for the NFL teams. But from the college side of things, once again, we live in the wild, wild west where nobody wants to be the sheriff. Nobody wants to be the parent that puts their foot down. Look, I will be honest and say, as the father of a pair of teenagers, okay? I know, these boyish good looks. How could I possibly have 2 teenagers? But as the father of a pair of teenagers, sometimes I gotta be the bad cop. I gotta be the mean dad. I gotta tell my kids, no, you can't. And the NCAA, they didn't want to tell Brendan Sorsby or Texas Tech, no, you can't. Federal and state judges didn't want to say, no, you can't. And the Big 12 finally kind of came around in a way to say, well, we'd really prefer it if you didn't. So it wasn't quite, no, you can't. But finally, Brendan Sorsby and I imagine his people read the room and said, okay, no, we can't. Because if eventually someone really does rule against us in this thing and it's late July, we're screwed. Sorry, kid, you're going to be stuck playing 8 weeks of football in Manitoba or somewhere else or trying to stay in shape for next year's draft. Let's just do it now. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's pay the consequences, whatever they may be, and see how it goes. And so Sorsby will enter the supplemental draft. And again, we'll get to the mechanics of that in just a couple of minutes. But this all could have been avoided, or at least could have happened a whole lot earlier had someone put their foot down and been the adult in the room earlier. Once again, the NCAA, they don't know how to do that. Next.
4.
He to right. He did it! 13th cycle in franchise history. It's courtesy of Pete Crow Armstrong.
From Marquee Sportsnet, Pete Crow Armstrong with a cycle for the Cubs last night at Wrigley. They won the game, but he was immediately picked off. I mean, is that not the story of Pete Crow Armstrong's year and the Chicago Cubs year? A good thing happens. What do they have, 9 walk-offs now this year? 3 more than anybody else in Major League Baseball. I think most of them at home. If they win, they make it dramatic. Give the Cubs that. But they lose and win in just about a 50-50 ratio. They're 3 games over 500, which, let's be honest, in the National League, you have to, I guess, look at it and say, okay, 50%, that's good. 50% is good. 500 ball, good. Better if you're in the American League. In the National League, it's not going to be good enough. Although they do sit in a tie for the final wild card spot. That is the story of the Cubs season and Pete Crow Armstrong season in a nutshell. It is good thing after good thing, and then bang, bad thing happens. But again, the Cubs did win the game, and it's the first cycle of the year in Major League Baseball in 2026. Next.
3.
Hagen banks 3-2. Rodriguez. Well struck right field. See ya. Who is hotter in the world than Adrian Rodriguez?
Another cycle. Adrian Rodriguez, sophomore shortstop for Texas, hitting for the cycle yesterday, going 5 for 5 in Omaha with 7 RBIs. 7 ribbies in a 14-2 elimination for the Longhorns of Alabama. And while that is incredible, the best part of the College World Series is the fact that things are celebrated, okay? Now, we've become much more accustomed to celebrations in Major League Baseball, right? Like, we don't mind the occasional bat flip from time to time these days. We don't mind the occasional backwards trot down the third baseline after you hit a walk-off homer. We don't mind that stuff anymore. But college baseball is somewhere between Major League Ball and Savannah Bananas on that celebration, have fun with it scale. Like, you see guys in the Oklahoma dugout last night. They have this big synchronized clap right before the first pitch of the game. You see them have fun with the game. And the College World Series is fun, man. From the Jell-O shot competition to the teams that you wouldn't ordinarily expect to be there, 2 of whom meet for a second time this afternoon, West Virginia and Troy, in an elimination game. It's a double elimination day at the College World Series in Omaha. The nightcap, they could score 36 runs in that game between Georgia and Texas tonight. Seriously, the total's 14.5, and I'm still going over, baby. That's the beauty of the College World Series and college baseball in general, is that it exists in that world between Major League Baseball, where, well, okay, yeah, celebrations are cool, but let's just not get too nuts, and like Little League Baseball, where you're totally cool watching a kid do cartwheels down the third baseline because they're kids. It's right there in that happy middle of baseball's still fun. And that's why I love the College World Series. And like I said, 2 more elimination games later today. Next.
2.
Peterson spins
bangs it off the glass and in. Darren Peterson showing some explosiveness.
Yes, no question about it. Drives to the basket, great finish. Keep in mind that when he's on the court this season, he accounts for 38% of Kansas' shots.
John Schaumby and Fran Fraschilla on ESPN. That was way back in January. I think it was early January. Two of Darren Peterson's season-high 32 in a 104-100 OT win against TCU. And Darren Peterson, who I think most analysts agree is one of the 2 or 3 best players in what is already viewed as a pretty legendary draft. It's hard to rank those kind of things before the guys even play a minute on an NBA floor, but it's looked at as one of the better drafts in recent memory. And Darren Peterson is looked at as one of the better players in that draft, if not the best, according to some people, including Darren Peterson, which is why I realized when I asked the rhetorical question about Darren Peterson, who the hell do you think you are? Not meeting or working out with anybody aside from the first overall Washington Wizards, that his answer would probably be legitimately and straight-faced, I'm Darren Peterson. Like Rick James on the Chappelle Show skit years ago. I'm Darren Peterson. He thinks he is, and enough people have told him that he is the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft. And so why should I meet with or talk to anybody else? But here's my question. After a year of managing his own minutes at Kansas, and we remember how much we talked about that, right? In January, most of February, that after a year of managing his own minutes, Darren Peterson is now trying to manage where he ends up. The Wizards have the first choice, Darren. Okay? So if they want to take you, that's all well and good. They'll take you. But they also may take A.J. DeBonsa. And that means you may have to go to Utah, 2nd overall. And maybe you're not excited about going to Utah, and you want to try to force your way out of there. Well, if I don't meet with anybody else, maybe I drop past the Jazz and I end up in Memphis. Maybe that's slightly better for me than going to Utah. Whatever it may be, Darren Peterson is once again trying to control the situation, dictate his own terms. And if I'm a team looking to draft near the top of the draft, I can't question how talented Darren Peterson is. I think that part's unquestionable. What is questionable is whether he's ever going to stop acting like a prima donna who gets to call his own shots, who gets to call his own minutes, call his own number. You're still Darren Peterson, and that's very good, but you're not great enough yet to where you get to dictate the terms like that. Next.
1.
113 yards, a lost fumble, and a pick. He'll take another shot, and this one's on the money to Cyrus Allen. Allen off to the races. Touchdown, Cincinnati. An 88-yard catch and run for a huge Bearcat score.
Dave Pasch on ESPN. A Brendan Sorsby 88-yard touchdown pass to Cyrus Allen against Utah. That was one of just 2 scores by Cincinnati in that game, though. The other one was a Sorsby running touchdown from, I want to say, like 20, 25 yards out. Maybe longer than that. Sorsby's talented. And this is the part that I think as we start to turn the page and finally put the failings of the NCAA and college administrators behind us and start to look ahead to what it may mean for NFL teams who have an opportunity to draft Sorsby, I think this is what we have to look at and ask ourselves, what is Brendan Sorsby worth? Because teams are going to get, and these are the mechanics of the NFL supplemental draft. All the teams with 6 wins or fewer last year will go into a lottery, a weighted lottery, where the Raiders would have the most lottery balls, and then all the way down to the final team with 6 wins, which would be, hold on, I want to make sure I have this right. I don't have it in front of me right now. There are 10 or 12 teams in that lottery. And they'll each get to bid on Brendan Sorsby effectively, saying, okay, well, I'd give up a 2nd-round pick, or I'd give up a 3rd-round pick. And whoever gives up the best pick will get Brendan Sorsby. If none of those teams decide to bid on Brendan Sorsby, then it goes to the next group of teams. Teams that didn't go to the playoffs but won more than 6 games. And then we do it again. And it goes through. Everybody gets to bid. What is Brendan Sorsby worth? Is he worth giving up a second-round pick in next year's draft, which may be better as far as quarterbacks go than this year's draft? Although we've seen how our evaluation of quarterback drafts has gone 10 to 12 months out. Didn't go well last year. So are you willing to give up a second-round pick in next year's draft for Brendan Sorsby now? Are you willing to weigh whether the NFL takes any sort of supplemental discipline against him? Last time a quarterback was taken in the supplemental draft, that happened. Terrell Pryor, way back when. And it was for much less than what Brendan Sorsby has been guilty of doing. So what does it look like? What is Brendan Sorsby? I can't, even as a guy who's a fan of a team that will be looking for a quarterback next year. Yes, I'm a Steelers fan, and Aaron Rodgers has got just this final year left in him. And then it's Will Howard or Drew Aller or maybe Brendan Sorsby. I don't know if I'd give up more than a third-round pick for that. Because when I go back and look at Sorsby, there were a couple weeks last year where he was not good. He knows how talented he is. He knows his arm strength. He knows his athletic abilities and hasn't yet caught up in judgment speed to physical athletic ability speed. Questionable judgment. Imagine that coming from Sorsby. And I think that's what will keep Brendan Sorsby from someone spending more than, say, a third-round pick on him in this supplemental draft. But the mechanics of it and how it all works, for the first time in 5 years, I think, we'll have a supplemental draft. For the first time in 7 years, I imagine someone will actually take the player available in this supplemental draft. It's going to be fascinating to watch. And a little bit later, right around 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific here on You Better You Bet, I just want to take a spin around the room and talk to everybody. Tyler, Kenny, Bill, myself, we'll hash it out. What is Brendan Sorsby worth? What do you think teams should be willing to give up for him? Between now and then, Brian Geltzeiler on the end of the NBA season, the beginning of the offseason, the Giannis sweepstakes, Darren Peterson, the draft, all of it. Top of the hour, Jason Sobel to talk about the U.S. Open getting started in just a couple of days out at Shinnecock. But coming up next, can we please, next time, just get some adults in the room? More on Sorsby entering the supplemental draft next here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
Sometimes you need some adults in the room to handle things, okay? You need the adults in the room to stand up and be the bad cop sometimes. And I think that applies to a couple of situations, and we'll get to them. It's not just the Brendan Sorsby case. There's actually one other big one that pops into my head. Literally, I thought of it during the break. We'll get into that in a second here on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today here on You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM. This segment sponsored by Progressive Commercial Insurance, protecting your business vehicles 24/7. See if you can save at progressivecommercial.com. Your thoughts on what Brendan Sorsby is worth. We will kick this around the crew here on You Better You Bet a little bit later in the show. But I'd be curious to hear what you think, whether you jump in the chat on YouTube or pick up the phone and give us a call, 310-840-4910, 310-840-4910. What is Brendan Sorsby actually worth? I want to pull that conversation apart in a little bit more detail later, and we'll reiterate the mechanics of the NFL supplemental draft as best as we understand them, because I think there's people that have been covering the NFL for years that are still trying to acquaint themselves with the details of how the NFL supplemental draft works. But you need to have adults in the room, okay? You need to have somebody who tells younger people, young adults even, the uncomfortable truth. I think that applies to a couple of situations here. Brian Geltzeiler of SiriusXM NBA Radio 1 hour from now to talk about the NBA offseason that now enters full swing, right? I mean, like, as soon as the finals are over, you plan the Knicks parade, which is Thursday, by the way, in Manhattan, and then you get ready for next week's draft, and whenever the other shoe may drop on a possible Giannis Antetokounmpo deal. Jason Sobel at the top of the hour to talk U.S. Open as well. But had there been a bad cop to enter the chat, as the kids say, do kids say that? I don't know. I'm woefully old and out of touch. Had somebody said, hey, I'm going to be the bad cop here, and I'm going to put my foot down and say, no, you can't play college football anymore. I realize it's the wild, wild west and we don't really have any rules. And we are fast approaching a day where a guy plays for one team in week 2 and a different team in week 3 because he gets a better NIL deal on Tuesday between the games. Look, there's nothing stopping that from happening. That's the way we look at this, right? The NCAA is toothless. They refuse to lay down the law or enforce any rules because really they have no power. So why even try to do anything if everybody's going to laugh at you and point like Nelson Muntz pointing at Bart Simpson anyway? So why even try? But somebody had to try. And finally, the Big 12 came around and played bad cop as much as anybody had in this situation yesterday, filing yet another legal document saying, we don't believe Brendan Sorsby should be allowed to play college football anymore. He bet on games involving his own team. The Big 12 would like to keep him from playing in its league. And Sorsby, undoubtedly seeing that this would drag out for a few more weeks and the deadline to enter the NFL supplemental draft coming up next week, said, okay, screw it. NFL supplemental draft time it is. And again, later in the show, we will get into what exactly that looks like for teams that may be looking for quarterbacks. But all it took was one adult. All it took was one adult to step into the room and say, guys, we're done with this charade, okay? And I think there's another place where maybe it's time for an adult to enter the room. And I want to be careful about this, not because I'm worried about hurting anybody's feelings or anything, but just because anytime I've noticed anyway, in the last few weeks, that you criticize Victor Wembanyama's behavior, people assume you're criticizing Victor Wembanyama's play on the floor, like just how talented he is. Nobody is arguing that Victor Wembanyama is quite possibly the singular most gifted player in the NBA right now. And I don't think you question that just because his team lost in 5 to the Knicks. I'm not questioning that. I'm questioning whether Victor Wembanyama, and I've said this before, I will repeat it again. I am glad social media did not exist, at least not in its current iterations, when I was Victor Wembanyama's age. That we could do stupid things or act like dumb kids or young adults without somebody holding on to it for years so they could throw it back in our face later, or even criticize us right in the moment. I did some dumb things in my early 20s. Victor Wembanyama is, by comparison to what most 22-year-olds are doing, he's got his stuff together. But there were moments, especially during the finals, in the way he acted where it felt like an adult needs to pull him aside. A more experienced adult. Pull him aside this summer and say, hey, Wemby, I get it. You're wildly competitive. Doesn't mean you don't shake hands as you're walking off the floor. Hey, Wemby, I get it. Everyone's questioning your strength and your manhood and your toughness and your demeanor. Doesn't mean you got to ragdoll Jalen Brunson. Or fire an elbow into someone's face. Like, you can play tough and mean, and you can be crazy competitive and still handle it like an adult. And I think there were moments where Wemby failed at that. Now, again, he's 22. He's going to learn from all this. He is. And I firmly believe he'll come back, not just bigger and stronger, maybe more weight rooms this offseason and less monasteries. I think he'll come back bigger and stronger, both physically and mentally and emotionally next year. And the Spurs should be the betting favorite to win the title next year, in my opinion. They're going to keep most of that team together. And yeah, they'll most likely still have to go through Oklahoma City. And if they face the Knicks again, that'll be a bit of a boogeyman. But that's projecting out 12 months from now. I'm not even trying to go that far. I'm just trying to get Wemby through the summer of disappointment. At least it'll start as a summer of disappointment and anger and frustration. And have somebody pull him aside and say, Victor, you are the face of this team. You are the face of the league to many people. We're going to be the bad cop. We're going to be the parent in the room, the adult, the more experienced adult. And we're going to say, listen, the childish things, the not shaking hands as you go off the court, the dropping the mic at the podium post-game and walking off, the flagrant fouls in some sort of odd attempt to prove that you are in fact tough enough in the postseason. That stuff, that's got to get pushed to the side. You've got to be, if you're going to give us this image of this stoic, philosophic, stroking your barely visible goatee on your chin, Wemby, who is more mature than his age, then you actually need to act on it and just not pontificate on it in post-game press conferences while you rub your chin. I need you to actually be that dude. And so it's another moment where an adult can step into the room. You can tell I'm really feeling this, huh? It's the teenagers in my life. An adult can step into the room and say, hey, I know you're only 22, but given where you're at in your life and your career, time to man up just a little bit. Be an adult. Just a little bit more, okay? Baby steps if you want, but let's take them in the right direction. Sorry, yeah, just a window inside what's going on in my life right now. To maybe help explain why I'm on this tangent about somebody being the adult in the room. I have a 17-year-old daughter. She wants to go to a concert tomorrow night. Not a crazy concert, a Chris Stapleton concert, okay? But the venue's an hour away. In Pennsylvania, you have what's called a Cinderella license. If you're under 18, you can't drive past 11 p.m. And so he said, hey, you're not driving to the concert. Find somebody else to drive to the concert. I'll get you the tickets. Just find somebody else. That's not even being mean. I'm not even being a bad cop there. I'm telling you, I'm getting you the tickets for the concert. You and your friends go. Just find somebody else to drive. Because you've had 2 wrecks in the school parking lot this year. I don't need another one. On a highway out in the sticks near West Virginia. Okay? So, a window into my soul, why I am feeling like we need more adults in the room these days. Top of the hour. What is Shinnecock going to be like for the U.S. Open? Do we want, and this is maybe a question later in the week, especially after we see the first round scores and how they go, but do we want the U.S. Open to be, for lack of a better way to put it, an ass kicker? Do we want the winner to struggle to break even par after 4 rounds? And can Shinnecock provide that this weekend? Jason Sobel will join us at the top of the hour to preview the U.S. Open. Coming up next, though, speaking of needing an adult in the room, I promise it's not going to be the theme of the entire day, but somebody needs to pull one young guy aside and say, hey, you're not doing yourself any favors when you handle things this way. I'll tell you who the young guy is and why I think he's handling things poorly next, right here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Peterson at the basket, slithers in and hits. He slithered to the goal like a rattlesnake and then was able to put it in.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
Boog Shambi, I believe that was a very descriptive call on a Darren Peterson drive and score on ESPN earlier this season. Peterson in the NBA draft, but refusing to meet with anybody other than the first overall Washington Wizards. Get into that in just a second, because I am on this tangent this morning. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today here on You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports. I'm on this tangent today by virtue of having two teenagers and arguing with them over teenage things about there needing to be an adult in the room, okay? You know who the adult could be? Who is, if I ever had to call in a dad to be bad cop in my stead, and I could pick anyone on earth, near the top of the list would be Carolina Hurricanes head coach Rod Brind'Amour, who, if you've seen the video of him in the locker room celebrating after they beat the Golden Knights in Vegas in Game 6 to clinch the Stanley Cup, is still wildly jacked for a man who is 20 years removed from winning his last Stanley Cup as a player. You could do worse than Rod Brind'Amour walking in, glaring at your children and saying, listen, this is how it's going to go. Foot down, I'm the bad cop. We'll talk about the end to the Stanley Cup final, those Carolina Hurricanes, whose parade will be on Saturday, and the forthcoming NHL offseason later in the show with Dennis Bernstein of SiriusXM NHL Radio and the fourth period. He'll join us around 11:20 Eastern, 8:20 Pacific here on Westwood One Sports. Of course, there's all kinds of footy today. 4 more matches, and you can use today's no-sweat goal scorer token on a qualifying anytime first or last goal scorer wager during the World's game and get bonus bets if you don't win. Give sweating your bets the boot. See what I did there? With BetMGM. Download the BetMGM app today. Please gamble responsibly. All 4 of today's matches have heavy favorites. If I pull up the schedule, and there are 4 technically if we count the game that kicks at midnight Eastern, 9 Pacific. You got France, Senegal at 3 Eastern, Iraq, Norway at 6 Eastern, Argentina, Algeria at 9 Eastern, and then at midnight Eastern, 9 Pacific, Austria and Jordan. Heavy favorites in those matches are France, Norway, Argentina, and Austria. Yes, Argentina in prime time tonight, 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, includes Lionel Messi. So you could do worse if you're looking for anytime goal scorer bets than Messi, who is minus 115 for an anytime goal today in his final, the first match of his final World Cup. We'll get into the U.S. Open at the top of the hour in about 10 minutes with Jason Sobel of SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio. Talk about Shinnecock, how it's expected to play this weekend, and who we should be looking at as leaders for this weekend's field at the U.S. Open. And I think of more, if not as much, if not more interest to most average everyday sports fans is what's the scoring going to look like? Because that's what the U.S. Open is known for every year. How much is it going to put these guys, the best golfers in the world, through the ringer? We'll talk to Jason about that at the top of the hour. We're also going to talk to Brian Geltzeiler of SiriusXM NBA Radio in about half an hour or so. And one of the things I want to talk to Geltz about is Darren Peterson. Is he being a prima donna? I think he is. I think he's acting like a guy who has not yet won what is necessary to be the guy dictating the terms to everybody else. Peterson is convinced, or at least Peterson's people are, his representatives, that he is going to be the first overall pick in the NBA draft, despite the fact that there the Washington Wizards sit with the opportunity to draft A.J. DeBonsa, who probably fits what they want to do more than Peterson does. And with Peterson only agreeing to meet with and or work out for one team, the team with the first overall pick, the Washington Wizards. He's essentially telling the world, I'm the best. I'm going to go number one, and I don't need to bother with the rest of you guys. And that, especially after the way he handled things for most of this past season at Kansas, would rub me the wrong way. If I were a GM, just looking at pure talent alone, I'd look at Darren Peterson, and especially if my roster had need for a guard, I'd be all over Darren Peterson. But if I'm also considering all the intangibles, all the extras that may come with that guy, I'd question, I don't know if I like the way this guy's carrying himself. Now, there would be some who argue, well, why shouldn't he carry himself like the most talented guy in the draft if he really believes he is? And there would be others still who would say, well, maybe he just doesn't want to go to Utah. And this is his way of scaring the Jazz away from him at number 2. The Jazz. Yeah. Scaring the Jazz away and maybe scaring himself into Memphis or even Chicago. Although I have a hard time seeing him slide to 4 past Memphis. The point is, yeah, there could be reasons for Darren Peterson acting this way. I don't agree with them. And I think they're indicative of, when you add it on top of the layer of the way he managed his own minutes this year at Kansas, it's indicative of a guy who is me first. And unless I had a stellar interview with him, which again, doesn't sound like he's going to grant teams the opportunity for, unless I had a stellar interview with him or a stellar background report on him that told me, no, this is up. Come on. It's just a guy looking out for himself. He's a good guy, team player. If he comes in, he makes everyone around him better, not just him stepping into the lineup. Unless I had that, I wouldn't be hyped to pick Darren Peterson. Based on talent alone, yes. Based on all the other intangibles swirling around, no. I'm not racing to the podium with that pick. It is prima donna behavior. Once again, we need an adult in the room to tell Darren Peterson, hey, there's a chance, pretty good chance you don't go first overall. And I get it. You don't want to go to Utah. But this is not the way to force yourself into a different situation, because you're now clouding the judgment of your character even more so than you did with the way you played this past season. We'll ask Brian Geltzeiler about that in about 20 minutes. But coming up next, Jason Sobel to preview the U.S. Open right here on Westwood One Sports.
It's time to laugh, to win, and to live the thrill of the action.
Hey, baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. What the hell's going on out here? No idea what's going on, but I am excited.
Every pick, every play, every game-changing moment.
Unbelievable!
This is You Better You Bet, brought to you by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
I know. We've still got 12 Sundays of no NFL football, and you feel like, oh, it's the lull. It's summertime. There's not as much going on. Are you nuts? We've got World Cup soccer. We've got College World Series baseball, not to mention the Major League variety. We've got parades planned for Thursday in New York and Saturday in Raleigh as the NHL and NBA turn the page from one season to another, just like that. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got the U.S. Open. Jason Sobel is going to join us in just a moment to talk about that. There is a lot going on, and you are here for all of it on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today here on You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM. We will talk the Giannis sweepstakes, the NBA draft a week away, everything else, what the Knicks did to win this title and how replicable it is for other teams around the league with Brian Geltzeiler of Sirius XM NBA Radio. That in about 20 minutes or so. But it's at Shinnecock, which has been torturous when it has hosted the U.S. Open. In 5 previous U.S. Opens at Shinnecock, only 3 players total have broken par. Will it be that punitive this weekend as well? From BetMGM, where he wrote up a great preview that I just stole that tidbit from, as well as Sirius XM PGA Tour Radio and CBS Sports HQ. Jason Sobel joins us here on You Better You Bet. Good morning, Jason. How are you? Are you ready for Shinnecock?
Chris, good morning. I could not be more ready as a Long Island guy. Not from this end of Long Island, a little more towards the middle. That said, I love the Hamptons. I love being out here. The weather's been fantastic. The wind's whipping around. It is going to be a fantastic week out here at Shinnecock.
One of the first things you mentioned in your preview for BetMGM is that the fairways are a little wider than they've traditionally been at Shinnecock for the U.S. Open, but that first cut of rough is thicker than it has been, and Rory McIlroy even commented on it, that as soon as you get off that first cut, you're in the thick stuff. You're in the tall fescue. So while it may seem like there's more room to stay in the fairway, it's even more punitive maybe than it has been in past years to miss the fairway. How does that change how especially the long hitters attack Shinnecock this weekend? Do they dial it back a notch to try and stay within the short stuff, or do they say, the hell with it, my game's built on driving this baby, I'm still going to step on the gas?
So it's a great question. And to get into this, before I move forward, I'm going to move back a little bit because I think those who don't watch golf on a regular basis, maybe those who are just kind of jumping in, making some bets for the U.S. Open this week are kind of wondering, like, okay, well, it's still guys that just have to hit the fairways. It's the precision guys at the U.S. Open. That hasn't been the case over the last decade, really until J.J. Spaun won at Oakmont last year. We saw Bryson DeChambeau a couple of times, Brooks Koepka a few times, Gary Woodland, John Rahm, basically the biggest hitters in the game who are winning the U.S. Open in recent years. I think Winged Foot in 2020 was a perfect example of what the USGA had done over the years was narrow the fairways so much that nobody was hitting fairways. So it's not just the power hitters who tend to spray it a little bit, but even the guys who normally hit it dead straight, because the fairways were so narrow and fast and firm, they were missing as well. So would you rather miss from 330 yards off the tee or 280? Well, all of a sudden, the power players had a massive advantage at places like Winged Foot and other courses for the U.S. Open over the last decade or so. What we see this week is that I think once again the precision players maybe don't have an advantage, but at least it's a level playing field, more level than we've seen recently with some wider fairways, the Russell Henley types, the Colin Morikawa types, the guys who don't hit it 320 in the air off the tee. Those guys can hit more fairways, and I think that's going to be more beneficial, obviously, this week. But even they'll be hitting the fairway more often than they did over the past decade at the U.S. Open. And again, that just helps level the playing field. And I don't think you're going to be able to be a Bryson DeChambeau and just say, I'm taking driver all over the place and mashing it. That said, we've got wind this week. We're expecting more wind throughout the 4 tournament days, and you've got to hit it out there. It's more than 7,400 yards, and you can't just say, well, I'll hit a 5-iron off the tee and keep it in the fairway. You're taking yourself out of the equation then as well. So you've got to hit driver, but you've got to hit it straight.
Follow him on X at Jason Sobel Golf. Jason Sobel with us previewing the U.S. Open here on Westwood One Sports. Last year, it was the rain, at least late in the U.S. Open, that affected things. This year, you've mentioned it a couple times already, Jason. It's the wind out there at Shinnecock. Does that have the capability of taking somebody out of this thing in the first 2 days?
It certainly does. And Mother Nature is the greatest determining factor of scoring that we have at any golf tournament, really, but especially the major championships. A month ago at the PGA, what we saw at Aronimink was, guys like me are sitting there on Tuesday, Wednesday beforehand suggesting that 15 under, maybe even 20 under could have won that golf tournament. Instead, we saw 9 under win by 3 shots. And the reason that happened is because it was cold and wet on Thursday morning when they started, and then the wind kicked up. And then on the weekend, it baked out. It got fast and firmer. And the players couldn't have just put together a game plan on Tuesday and Wednesday and said, here's what I'm going to do for the next 4 days, and stuck with that plan. They needed to adjust. I love when this happens. You can't manufacture it, of course, but when Mother Nature plays along and gives you some different types of weather patterns over the course of 4 days, it makes it really fun for a major championship. That's what we're going to get this week. And absolutely, I was just looking before we got on here, Chris, and the fact that we've got wind gusts of up to 35 to 40 miles an hour on Thursday afternoon already. It's going to get really tough. I mean, this is a golf course that it's tough in completely benign conditions. It's going to get very, very difficult when that wind starts blowing.
When I look at the odds board for this one, Jason, I still see Scotty firmly atop things. Plus 550 at BetMGM, and you get all the way down to 12-1 for Rory and 14-1 for Jon Rahm. Does that make sense to you? Does this set up for Scotty to take control if other guys start to fall by the wayside due to the conditions or the fairway conditions we talked about?
So a couple things here. First of all, Scotty's got this perfect storm that could happen this week. He's trying to capture the career Grand Slam, much as Rory McIlroy did at the Masters last year. On Sunday, which was his 30th birthday, Father's Day for a guy that's got 2 young boys now, and again, trying to get his first U.S. Open, which would complement all 3 other major championships and make him the 7th player in the history of the game to get that career slam. All of that said, he hasn't won in his last 11 starts. And I think, as we talked about, leveling the playing field might mean that we're bringing more players into play than just Scotty. And so you look at that plus 550 number and you say, boy, is he short. I've got to really think that I like Scotty this week. It's a longer number than we've seen at Scotty in a major championship in the last 3 years. We've seen him at 3-1, 3.5, 4-1 for the most part over the last few years since he's become the unequivocal best player in the world. And so am I chasing that number at 5.5-1? No. Does it intrigue me? Not really. But if you're really into Scotty this week, all I can tell you is you get a couple of points higher longer than you normally do at this event. So I do think there's, like I said, a little bit of value on Scotty, but I think the playing field's too level. I think there's too many other guys who are playing well right now. And again, it's hard to go out there with all the pressure of trying to not just win a golf tournament, and he hasn't won in 5 months, but go win to capture the career slam. It's been a difficult proposition for a lot of other players, for the other than Tiger, who did it pretty quickly. But we saw Rory McIlroy for 11 years at the Masters kept trying over and over, and it would not shock me to see Scotty Scheffler have to go around the U.S. Open a few times before he gets that career slam.
Jason Sobel of SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio, impeccable preview of Shinnecock and the U.S. Open at BetMGM.com that you can check out right now. Follow him on X at Jason Sobel Golf here with us on Westwood One Sports. Who is somebody, like the group that intrigues me the most if I'm looking at betting this, and just the group of names that I think have probably captured, if you're a golf fan and you've watched the way guys have played over the last 2 to 3 months, you see that group at 20-1. Matt Fitzpatrick, Cam Young, Tommy Fleetwood is in that trio as well at that number. How legitimate do those guys have a shot at winning this, and what do they have to do to make it more legitimate?
I think they all have a really good shot, and my eyes keep going towards Matt Fitzpatrick, who actually opened to start the week at 25-1. Granted, the odds have been out for the whole year for the U.S. Open, but he was 25-1 just 24 hours ago, 48 hours ago, and it's already dropped to 20-1. I spoke with Fitzpatrick after his press conference yesterday, and look, everything's kind of firing on all cylinders. He's a guy that's won 3 times on the PGA Tour this year, the only 3-time winner. He was runner-up last week in Canada. He's won a U.S. Open in the past, just 4 years ago at Brookline. And he played well here in 2018. The last time the U.S. Open was contested at Shinnecock, he finished in the tie for 12th place. That's sort of it. Does it guarantee that Matt Fitzpatrick is going to win or even contend for this title? Of course not. That said, he kind of ticks all the boxes that we're looking for. And so I can't really find any faults with Fitzpatrick whatsoever. Most players, I can point to something a little off. Okay, maybe the ball striking's not there. Maybe the short game isn't quite where this player needs to be. Maybe his form hasn't been great over his last few starts. Fitzpatrick has everything that I'm looking for. So I think that 20-1 range makes a lot of sense. Cameron Young's another guy that I think a lot of us, myself included, were on at the PGA Championship a month ago, another Northeast golf course where you had to hit it a long way. We might have just been a month off for the New York native, and maybe this is the week that Cameron Young gets that first career major championship. And then looking a little bit further down the board, Tyrrell Hatton intrigues me. Tyrrell Hatton, and depending on the book you're looking at, I think BetMGM has him at 33-1 right now. Tyrrell Hatton's a guy that you wouldn't think matches up well to a U.S. Open just because this is a guy that's he's one of the biggest hotheads in the game of golf. He's more combustible than anybody else in the pro ranks, and the U.S. Open is a tournament that can get guys feeling that way. And he told me last year in the midst of finishing top 5 at Oakmont, he said, look, I'm used to playing golf like this. I feel like this on a Thursday morning at a regular event, so it's no big deal for me. All these other guys are usually pretty calm. They usually keep their heads and then all of a sudden get to a U.S. Open, and now they get all mad about what's going on around them. He goes, this is just normal for me, and it's no big deal. I actually love the fact that he's kind of figured that out, and I would not be surprised if Tyrrell Hatton is up there on Sunday afternoon as well.
One guy who's been total Jekyll and Hyde, not just this season, but really, I mean, we could go back for the foreseeable recent past. Jordan Spieth, who it feels like in fits and starts is finding things and then all of a sudden loses them again. The way Shinnecock is set up this weekend, the way this field sets up, how do you view Spieth at this point in his career with an opportunity to finally win another major?
I think it's coming, Chris. I do think he's playing better golf. I thought the best description I've heard from a player talking about his own game happened just a few weeks ago, and Spieth said it's like he's playing whack-a-mole, because it's true. He'll drive it well, he'll hit the irons well, the wedges are great, and then he can't make a putt. And then the next day, all of a sudden the putter works, but he can't drive it in the fairway. And the day after that, he's driving it well and he's putting well, but the wedges look terrible. And it's like he's just trying to figure everything out on a daily basis. That said, he's, as of last week, only one of 15 players who's positive strokes gained, who is above field average in all 4 major categories for performance. And he's playing well. You know, he's doing everything, just not all at once. And so I do think it's coming for Jordan Spieth. I don't think it's coming this week. I think that this week is just a test of who has it when they get here. I don't know that you're going to find everything when you get to Shinnecock. That said, he's probably playing better than I think people realize. The performance sort of outweighed the results. I always look at it in terms of a Major League Baseball pitcher, a guy who's 6-10 with a 2.52 ERA. You say, he doesn't have a good record, but you look at the ERA and you're like, oh, he's actually pitching really well. He's just not getting a whole lot of lucky breaks. I kind of look at Jordan Spieth like that right now. We should have some positive regression, one of those oxymoronic terms in this industry that we often use in the second half of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts picking off a few, at least title contentions, if not wins. And we only have a couple of months left in the PGA Tour season. But I don't think it happens for Spieth this week.
Jason Sobel of SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio, CBS Sports HQ, and of course, you can find his full preview of this up at betmgm.com right now. He's out at Shinnecock for the U.S. Open this weekend with us here on Westwood One Sports. Give me some names, Jason, that you think we've talked about the ability to keep it straight off the tee while still having distance. We know, I think most people know how brutal these greens could be depending on what the conditions are like. Give me a couple of names that you think, just based on their work in the short game, we could look up and say, okay, not the best driving week, maybe not the best putting week, but they were right there in it given the conditions because they were able to handle their wedges and their irons well.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick Reed is one of those players, and Patrick Reed is a guy that we've known as one of the best short games in the world over the last decade or so, but he's a guy that's wholly focused on the major championships right now. He's suspended from the PGA Tour for playing on LIV. He's quit LIV Golf. He's taken up DP World Tour membership, and he's already gotten enough points over on the European circuit to get his PGA Tour card back. So he's sort of just kind of hanging around. He's sort of in this golf purgatory where he's not really playing much in Europe. He can't play on the PGA Tour. He's done with LIV. And so he's just like, hey, let me go out and play really well at the majors. And he's got a couple of top 12 finishes. I love that short game. Shane Lowry is a guy who's kind of been snake bitten and trying to get that next victory, but performance-wise, has been very good. The short game's actually been the worst part of his game, but if you watch Shane Lowry in any practice area, you'll go, man, that guy's got some of the softest hands around the green that we know. And Maverick McNeely is a guy who's very intriguing to me. More as a floor play than a ceiling, but he's got, I believe, 12 of his 14 starts this year. He's finished 32nd or better, none better than 10th. That said, he is one of only 3 players, along with Scotty Scheffler and Eric Cole, who ranks in the top 20 in both wedge play and putting this season. So Matt McNeely makes a lot of sense. And then if you want to just find some numbers, if you're just looking at some long shots this week, Harris English, who's played well at the major championships over the last few years, he's around 90-1 right now. That's a big number for a guy who's played good golf this year. Brian Harmon, we saw him win the Open Championship just a few years ago, hovering around 175-1. Akshay Bhatia won it the Arnold Palmer Invitational a couple of months ago. That's about as hard as it gets. It's almost a U.S. Open light. He won that one. He's about 140-1 this week. So there are some big numbers. If you want to get out of that Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, even Matt Fitzpatrick, Cameron Young type of range, I wouldn't be shocked to see any of those guys win, especially coming off Aaron Rai winning as a big triple-digit long shot just a month ago at the PGA Championship.
Jason, great stuff. Appreciate all the insights. Enjoy Shinnecock this weekend, and we'll definitely keep an eye on what you've got for us, keeping us up to date all weekend long. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Follow him on X at Jason Sobel Golf. As mentioned, BetMGM.com has a great preview from Jason up right now on some of those plays he mentioned and a bunch of other ones for the U.S. Open at Shinnecock this weekend. The main question when you're an average everyday sports fan and you're sitting down to watch the U.S. Open is just how brutal is this course going to be to these guys? And it sounds like guys that are willing to play within themselves, for lack of a better way to put it, are going to be the ones that have the most success, or at least have to work from behind a little bit less. And you have that out there, lingering, looming. Scotty Scheffler looking for the U.S. Open title. That would be, with the number where it is, as Jason said, at 550, that would be a look I would definitely have tucked in my back pocket right now, and maybe we'll throw that in before the end of the show here on You Better You Bet. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos here today. Coming up in less than an hour, Brendan Sorsby's headed to the supplemental draft. What is he actually worth? What do we think somebody is willing to give up for Sorsby? And how many question marks are there about not just off the field, but on the field, what he can actually do when he steps on an NFL field. But coming up next, the title has been won. The parade has been scheduled for Thursday, and we're just a week away now from the NBA draft. We will dive headlong into the NBA offseason with Brian Geltzeiler of SiriusXM NBA Radio. Geltz joins us next right here on Westwood One Sports.
Wemby tries a three, puts it up, off the mark. Anunoby the rebound. It's over. It's over. Knicks fans, this is not a dream. Your long, long wait has ended. Go ahead and cry. After 53 years, the Knicks are finally NBA champions once again.
Welcome back to You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Mike Breen on ABC and ESPN with the final call of Game 5 the other night as the Knicks win. And now it's about, can they repeat? Because that's always the question in the NBA. At least for the last 8 years, nobody has repeated as champs. And what stands in their way? And what else should we look to see go down, at least over the next week leading up to the draft, and then throughout the rest of the NBA offseason? Brian Geltzeiler in just a moment to talk about all of it here on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today here on You Better You Bet. The NHL season has ended as well with the Carolina Hurricanes winning the Stanley Cup. Dennis Bernstein of the Fourth Period and Sirius XM NHL Radio will join us in less than an hour to talk about how replicable what the Canes did is for the rest of the league with the NHL offseason now looming as well. This segment sponsored by Progressive Commercial Insurance, protecting your business vehicles 24/7. See if you can save at progressivecommercial.com. The parade is planned. It's on Thursday, and the Knicks are making their rounds. OG Anunoby may still be on another planet. At least he looked like that on Good Morning America yesterday. This is what you do when you win a title. You celebrate, and everybody celebrates right along with you, especially if they're fans of the winning team. Here to talk about what the Knicks did from Sirius XM NBA Radio. Follow him on X at BGeltzNBA. Brian Geltzeiler joins us now here on Westwood One Sports. Good morning, Geltz. How are you?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
Fantastic, man. I want to start there with the Knicks. For the fans of the Knicks, it's all about the afterglow still. You're not even thinking about the offseason. You're thinking about, how early do I have to get downtown for the parade? What's it going to be like? This is amazing. I'm going to tell my kids about this, all the stories. For the rest of the NBA, it's about, how do we do next year what the Knicks did this year? So I want to start with, what do the Knicks have to do to try and keep this core together? How much turmoil or movement might they face this offseason?
Well, listen, first of all, they did this year up against the second apron. And Mitchell Robinson's going to be a free agent, and the Knicks really are determined to keep him. They're going to have to go well into the second apron to keep him, and I think they're prepared to do that. I don't think this is going to be a situation like 2011 where the Dallas Mavericks won the NBA championship and Mark Cuban decided that we need to be nimble financially and kind of broke up some of the core of the team. The Knicks are not going to worry about being nimble financially. The Knicks will essentially do what we saw the Celtics do after winning in 2024, which was the fact that they kept that Porzingis, Horford, Holiday core together and paid a big luxury tax bill with the thought of, let's try to see if we can have a 2 to 3 year window. The Knicks will attempt to do that. If it starts to crumble and comes apart a little bit, they'll get themselves out of the second apron, because we've seen that they have very, very shrewd management that can manage things financially very well, which they've done in the past. But now is a time where the Knicks are going to take advantage of the fact that Jim Dolan has always been willing to spend more than the next guy. And now this is what it's going to be. But I will say this about the Knicks. They're not going to be able to retain Landry Shamet, and they're going to need to replace him. I know Knicks fans love Mohamed Diawara. Maybe he's a guy they can keep, and he plays for them. Maybe he doesn't. Who knows? Their first-round draft pick is going to be really important this year. They have to be careful not to take a developmental project, but to take an older player who can come in and be a rotation guy immediately, because they're going to have to pay him a rookie scale deal, and it's going to cost them a lot of money when they're in the second apron and have to pay luxury tax on top of it. So the draft pick here for the Knicks, and a team that just won an NBA championship, actually looms pretty important in terms of what their chances are to repeat. We just saw a San Antonio team make an NBA final with some young guys. There's young guys that can help you on this level, and that cost-controlled talent when you're building trying to build some kind of dynasty can be really, really vital. And I think it's something to keep an eye on what the Knicks do in next Tuesday's draft.
Before I get to the rest of the league, and in particular the Antetokounmpo sweepstakes that we might see over the next week or so, let me pivot back to the team that just lost. You mentioned the Spurs. Good young team, solid core. Wemby's not going anywhere, and I think we'll grow up a lot both physically and mentally and emotionally this summer. What do they need to do, in your opinion, other than just go through this experience? I mean, what do they need to do to their roster to reconfigure, if anything, going into next year as the favorites?
They need a big athlete that they can play both next to Wemby and for Wemby. When you look at what happened to the Spurs, part of what beat them against the Knicks was the lack of versatility in their rotation. It was Victor Wembanyama and a group of perimeter players. And you saw how devastating in the last two series the Luke Cornett minutes were. They were bad. And although they're paying Cornett, they have him under contract for 3 more years at $30 million. The reality is for them, as a backup center in the regular season, he's fine. You get in the playoffs, you want to be able to match up small with somebody and have a small ball type of five. The closest guy they have to that's Carter Bryant, and that ain't him. And so that, to me, is the one spot they're going to have to go do something. I know there's a lot of talk about moving De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox had a poor final. He did not have a wonderful playoff, and I do have my concerns about Fox and him not doing what he was brought there to do, which is essentially be a guy that enhances Victor Wembanyama and gets him the ball more. Fox did not do that enough, and that's definitely going to have to change. With that said, he did play the last two series with a bad ankle. That is in the regular season, he would not have been playing. So I think for the Spurs, right now, Fox's value is not at a high with a 4-year, $240 million extension kick in. I would not think they're going to do anything to move him, but I do think you see something from them where they find somebody at a reasonable price that can come in and play small ball five and be more of a traditional four next to Victor Wembanyama, because I think that was something that was uncovered that they desperately needed.
Brian Geltzeiler of SiriusXM NBA Radio with us here on Westwood One Sports. Are there targets out there for that role for them, Geltz?
Yeah, listen, there's always targets out there, and the Spurs are loaded with draft picks. So, and again, not the easiest player type to find in the way that the NBA works right now, because again, the traditional power forward has been somewhat phased out. But yeah, they'll be able to find somebody that can be versatile enough to be that type of 6'8", 6'9" guy that can be bouncy enough to play some five and also supports Wemby and kind of a dunker spot type of situation. They were very hesitant to play two bigs in this Knicks series. Part of the reason was because of the bigs that they had. So I think you're going to go see, listen, I'll give you a good example. A Nick Claxton type with the Nets is not a bad guy for them at a reasonable $20 million deal, and he's a guy that's available. So if that's a guy they could go get, he would fit that role well, because Wemby likes to play on the perimeter offensively. You can bury him in the dunker spot, and then when you want to take Wemby out and play smaller and more nimble and faster, he'll do a decent job at the five. So that's just an example, but it's that type of player that you're looking for to be able to slot in that spot.
All right, let me pivot back to the Knicks, because it's copycat season in both the NBA, the NHL. Everybody tries to copy what the champs just did well so that they can make their own run the following year. What is replicable about what the Knicks did this year that other teams that may feel like they're close can go out and do this offseason to put themselves in that position a year from now?
What the Knicks did is not as untraditional as I think it's been made out to be in the media. You still have to draft and develop guys. And what I mean by that is this. The Knicks drafted and developed R.J. Barrett and Manuel quickly, and that translated into OG Anunoby. And that was a vital player for them. The Knicks made some bets. They made a bet on Anunoby's contract. They made a bet on Mikal Bridges and the 5 first-round draft pick deal, which right now, it had an opportunity cost too if that was Giannis. But what's the deal with that opportunity cost? You don't care now because you won an NBA title. So it's still about some of the same things. But I think it's also important to note that the Knicks that's part of the Knicks model in building this is not replicable. And I mean that in this respect. Free agency is not what it used to be in this particular CBA. And part of why the Knicks did as well as they did is, listen, the Karl Towns trade was two guys they signed as free agents, Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, that went out for him. So that's going to be harder to replicate. I mean, it's easy to say, hey, go sign a guy like Jalen Brunson. Well, who's going to be able to do that at the number they signed him? I mean, it's so some of what they were able to do and cash in on was before the rules changed. So it's still about draft and develop. To me, the copycat aspect of this is what the Spurs did. And that's even going to be hard because the Spurs tanked their way into this. And now with the new lottery rules, it's going to be much harder to tank your way into things. It's almost impossible. So some of this is going to be, hey, how do we do it, almost build a team without necessarily having, multiple superstars. Now, hey, listen, Jalen Brunson has emerged as a superstar and quite an unlikely one because he was a second-round pick. Karl Towns, you want to say he's a superstar? Listen, he's a borderline All-NBA guy and certainly defensively proved himself to be a really good defensive big in these playoffs. I don't know that anybody could have guarded Victor Wembanyama better. But again, this was an ensemble approach for the Knicks. And if you look back historically, when have we seen ensemble approaches succeed? Not all that much. Listen, the time before this was the 2014 Spurs. Even the 2011 Mavs was Dirk and an ensemble approach. Before that, you go back to the 2004 Pistons. So I think what this does is liven up the ability to say, hey, maybe we can win without the traditional top 2, top 3 pick superstar to build around. So that's what's going to be interesting is how teams want to do that. But I do think you will see teams in terms of being maybe more reticent to trade guys that they drafted and developed to try to see if they can get guys that they feel fit their model better. The other thing is this, relationships mattered also. The CAA relationship with Leon Rose helped the Knicks with Anunoby. Obviously, relationships helped with Jalen Brunson. It certainly helped them when they wanted to bring in Karl Towns because Worldwide West had a relationship with him from the time Towns was 15 years old. And then the Bridges relationship and the Hart relationship with Jalen Brunson coming from Villanova. So that type of connection thing you may see other teams try to replicate.
Brian Geltzeiler of Sirius XM NBA Radio with us here on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today here on You Better You Bet. Let's pivot now to Giannis Antetokounmpo. Rumblings that it may be down to Boston and Miami, and it's up to Giannis to decide where he wants to go. There's always the question of, is there somebody else involved lurking in the shadows? How do you expect this to play out over the next week or so, Brian?
The Miami situation is interesting because I don't know that Milwaukee wants their package, and that's where Giannis wants to go. And I don't think Milwaukee, with the way the relationship is ending here with Giannis, are going to be constrained by his desires. Now, listen, Giannis can try to bluff out of it and say, well, this is the last year of my contract. If you trade for me, I won't sign an extension. But the question I would ask you, is Giannis going to do that with the Boston Celtics? I don't think so. I think he'd be silly to do that. I think to get the partner with Jason Tatum, it would be one of the great spots he could be in his career. The team I would tell you to keep an eye on that is lurking is going to be the Houston Rockets. Keep a close eye on them. They have a ton of draft capital. You got the feeling after what happened last summer in Eurobasket and then the year that he had, that Alperen Şengün is kind of peaked for what he is, and the contract is a competitive contract, and I think he's got a lot of value. So to put Şengün and 3 first-round picks in a deal, or 3 or 4 picks in a couple of swaps, which Houston has to spare, I think Houston could kind of come in at the last minute underneath everybody and steal them. And again, if I'm Giannis, I feel the same way. Like, what are you going to do? You're not going to want to play with Kevin Durant and Amen Thompson and Jabari Smith and that group. I think you come in there, you're not going to want to leave there to run to Miami as a free agent where the cupboard's going to be bare. The thing you have to remember about Giannis, he wants what he wants, and he wants to go where he wants to go. The whole reason he's leaving Milwaukee because he wants to win. So if teams in winning situations are able to bring him in and enhance what they have, the competitor in Giannis is not crazy enough to prioritize location over being in a winning program and have a chance to go win a championship. So I kind of think keep an eye on the Rockets here, and I think the Celtics are much more viable in this than I think anyone wants to let on. Just because here's the thing for Milwaukee, they'll get some Celtics picks, but they know that they can flip Jaylen Brown in a Giannis deal and get a whole lot of what they want out on the open market. And it may be a situation like what Portland did with Lillard, where they were able to get third teams involved and collect assets from 2 sides. You may see a situation that happens that way, and I think that will be very interesting. Like, listen, they had Phoenix involved in that deal. They were able to bring in Ayton. So, they couldn't get exactly what they wanted from one team in a deal, pulled an extra team in with other really good players, and in next next thing you knew, they had the type of package they wanted. You may see John Horst in Milwaukee pull something like that off, and I would think it'd be likely with a Giannis deal, it's going to be a 3-team deal at a minimum.
Fascinating stuff, especially as it relates to the Celtics and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and breaking up that tandem as well. One final thing for you, Brian, before I let you run. The Darren Peterson thing is, I don't know, it continues to rub me the wrong way, the fact that he won't meet or work out with anybody other than the Wizards. Is this contrived by him and his people to try and scare Utah off so that he slides past the Jazz? Does he legitimately think he's going 1 overall ahead of DeBonsa, or is this just more Darren Peterson being Darren Peterson?
This is very similar to Ace Bailey last year. I mean, I don't know that Darren Peterson being Darren Peterson is fair. Darren Peterson had, for all of the negative attention that went on him last year at Kansas, still averaged 20 points a game. And I know, leaving games wasn't the best look and maybe had the wrong agent message in his ear, and that's why I compare it to Ace Bailey last year, who did not want to work out for the Jazz, got drafted by them, and then early on was not happy about going there, and then fired his agent and had a good year. So I think there's some of that. Danny Ainge won't be scared off by that, but I don't know that Utah wants Darren Peterson. Darren Peterson either wants to be the number 1 overall pick or he wants to go to the Bulls. That's what this is about. He doesn't want to go to the Jazz. He doesn't want to go to Memphis. He wants to go somewhere where he's in a larger market and can be marketed or be the number 1 pick. And even in Washington, it's a good market. These are the types of markets Darren Peterson wants to go to. The question is other teams going to kind of roll over for that? Maybe, maybe not. Listen, if I'm a Utah or Memphis and I have a guy that I'm going to have to sell on my program versus guys like Cam Boozer or Caleb Wilson that I won't have to sell on my program, they're just going to come in and contribute immediately. Why do I want to deal with the headache? And that's the part with Peterson here. Peterson and his camp understand this. Chicago's not passing at him at 4. And so if he can slide by 2 or 3, I think he'd be happy to land in that location. And I think that's what he's trying to engineer. He wants to be 1. He wants to be 4. And listen, I think if Chicago really wants him, both Utah and Memphis, that's Danny Ainge and Zach Kleiman, 2 guys with real good track records as GMs. And I say Danny Ainge, his son Austin, is there running the show as well, but we know better. Danny's got plenty of input. Those guys can extract something out of Chicago, i.e. the 15 pick, and get an extra first-round pick and a really good draft for a guy they probably would have passed on anyway. That may be in play here as well. Peterson is kind of, telegraphing where he wants to be and what he wants to do. And if somehow Utah or Memphis has the ability to use that against the Bulls to extract an extra asset, we'll see what happens. Here's the thing. I don't know that Memphis will be able to do it for the 1 spot. I think at that point, Chicago sits on their hands. Danny Ainge in Utah took Bailey last year, saying he's going to take Peterson, even if it's a bluff, won't play as a bluff to the Chicago Bulls. And that's what's going to be interesting here. So, listen, I understand what Peterson's trying to do, and I think he's going to be a fantastic NBA player, could end up being the best player out of this draft. But right now, Darren Peterson has shown you he's going to prioritize his own future and not really care about negative attention in the media, and that's carrying over into how he's handling the draft process.
Actually, one more final quick one for you, Gouts, before I let you run, if you can get it in 60 seconds. How quickly can they turn it around in Chicago now with Tiago Splitter as the head coach, if that were to work out with Peterson landing there?
Sometimes I love Tiago Splitter. It's a home run hire. It's a fantastic hire. With all that said, in the NBA, for the most part, sometimes it ain't about the X's and the O's. It's about the Jimmies and the Joes. And they don't have enough players right now. Listen, they're going to bring in a number 4 player. It's probably going to be either Wilson or Peterson, I would think. With all the buzz on Boozer, I think he goes in the top 3. And you have Giddey, you have Bizelis, who I'm really high on, and you got nothing else. And for them, they really have to roll up their sleeves and do some player development stuff. And make no mistake about it, that's why Splitter is there. Splitter had a big role in Denny Avdia being a borderline All-NBA guy this year. Splitter he thinks outside the box. He has guys play a little more positionless, which favors Bizelis and Giddey and whoever they get in the draft. I'm not big on this Noah Senge guy they took last year, but they'll try to make a horse race of it with him. Splitter is a player development guy. The Bulls are going to have a miserable year this year. There's no doubt. However, they're going to be committed to Tiago Splitter, and they're going to stay with him for a while. and he's going to have a chance to build this thing in his own image. And I think we get out of a situation where this year and maybe next year, I think the Bulls are going to be bad this year. I think they'll make a jump next year because I really like Bryson Graham. I think he's going to do a very good job. I like what I'm seeing already out of him. And by the third year splitters there, I think they could be a playoff team. I think that's how quickly this thing could rise. The Bulls, it's been a long time since they've had the right people kind of doing what they need to do to take them. Probably not since Jerry Krause have they had the right kind of management and the right kind of coaching. I love Billy Donovan, but he was kind of miscast in the role that he had there with the rest of that organization. This organization, I think, is now finally, after bottoming out, starting to trend up.
Brian, great stuff as always, man. I could talk to you for another half hour. This offseason is going to be fascinating, especially as it ramps up over the next week. Appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your day, man.
You too. Take care, Chris. Thank you, buddy.
Yep, Brian Geltzeiler of Sirius XM NBA Radio. Follow him on X at BGeltzNBA. Yeah, that's an interesting combination if it should end up in Chicago together. And I know Bulls fans have been thirsty for a while, but to maybe see out on the horizon and have hope that it's not a mirage this time, that oasis is maybe waiting for you with, as Geltz called him, a developmental coach, splitter, somebody that can help get the most out of your young guys, get the most out of your roster as they start to accumulate that young talent. Darren Peterson there, that would be the kind of guy who you could build around as long as his head's in it. Coming up top of the hour, back to the Brendan Sorsby story and where we think it makes the most sense for him, what we think teams will be willing to give up for Brendan Sorsby in the supplemental draft. But coming up next, it is that time of year where the rules just go out the window for some people. I'll tell you who we're talking about next right here on Westwood One Sports.
OG, let's get to you, man. Come on, just smile one time for me. There we go. Yeah.
There it is.
Hey, give us that meme, OG. Give us that meme. That's what I'm talking about. You know,
Oh, he's looking at you. Oh, you getting that look now.
Welcome back to You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Courtesy of ABC, Good Morning America yesterday, OG Anunoby looking like he was Snoop on April 20th, just on another planet. And that's what you do this time of year when you win a title, and everybody's cool with it. The World Cup is going on as well. We've got France, Senegal, Iraq, Norway, Argentina, Algeria, Austria, Jordan, all being played. And if you're looking to get in on the footy, use today's no sweat goal scorer token on a qualifying anytime first or last goal scorer wager during the World's game and get bonus bets if you don't win. Give sweating your bets the boot with BetMGM. Download the BetMGM app and please gamble responsibly. I love this time of year when you've got Stanley Cup champs and NBA champs running around doing crazy things like Ovechkin swimming in a fountain like a toddler a couple years ago after the Caps won the cup. Like way back in the day when the Stanley Cup ended up at the bottom of Mario Lemieux's swimming pool after they won the cup in the early 90s. Like, you know, this is the time of year where we allow the champs to do whatever they want, and I'm totally fine with it. To the victors go the spoils. Enjoy yourselves, guys. Enjoy your time and the parades later this week in both New York and Raleigh. Coming up next, what is Brendan Sorsby worth? We'll go around the room and talk about how this could play out in the supplemental draft. It's Westwood One Sports.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
And here we are, the final hour of the show, the Power Hour on You Better You Bet. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos on Westwood One Sports. Always live inside that Westwood One Sports app. Take us with you. Maybe it's vacation time for you. Maybe you're making a drive to the beach. Maybe you're going somewhere, anywhere but work. Don't forget, we are right there with you. Also live inside the Odyssey app, AUDACY. And, of course, across North America on Sirius XM Channel 375. Turn it up nice and loud while the kids scream in the back seat and ask, are we there yet? You could say, shut up. I'm trying to learn how the supplemental draft works, kids. Be quiet and let your dad learn something while we're on the way to the beach. But we have got you. We will talk the end of the NHL season. Carolina Hurricanes are Stanley Cup champs after Sunday night's victory and start to turn the page to next year's NHL season with Dennis Bernstein of the Fourth Period and Sirius XM NHL Radio. He'll join us in about 20 minutes here on Westwood One Sports. But as I just mentioned, the NFL supplemental draft, it's actually going to happen this year, it looks like. Brendan Sorsby has decided to forego any further legal battles with the Big 12, with Texas Tech, with the NCAA, anybody that may have been for or against him retaining a further year of eligibility after being found guilty of betting on games while he was quarterbacking Indiana, or I guess while he was on the Indiana roster, betting on games that his team was involved in. So he's applying for the NFL supplemental draft. And very quickly, as succinctly as we can explain it, here is how the NFL supplemental draft works. Actually, you know what? I'm not good. Bill Zimmerman, our esteemed executive producer, did a fantastic job during the break of explaining this in about 30 seconds. So I'm going to just bring Bill in because he's done a much better job of explaining this already this morning than I could ever attempt to do. Bill, tell the kids, how's the supplemental draft work? Oh, turn your mic on first.
How about now?
And we got him.
All right. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Fun with microphones. All right. So basically, the supplemental draft is a blind bid by NFL teams to bid on Brandon Sorsby. And what they're bidding on is their 2027 draft capital. So basically what teams can do is they can submit, we would take Sorsby with our second round pick, our third round pick, whatever it might be. And it'll go round by round. So any teams that put in a blind bid for a first round pick, that'll pass. Then they'll move on to the second round. And this all happens in a matter of minutes. And wherever the team is, so let's say the Arizona Cardinals are like, we love Brandon Sorsby. They're the only team that bids a third round pick for Brandon Sorsby. Then Sorsby goes to the Cardinals, and the Cardinals forfeit their 2027 third round pick. That's the best way to do it. And I believe if it's two teams put in the same amount, it's whichever team had the worst year in 2025, I believe is how they break the tie.
Yeah, so the way I saw Dan Graziano, I think, explain that portion of it is the teams, every team in the league is separated into three groups. There's 6 wins or fewer. That is group 1. Teams that won more than 6 games but didn't make the playoffs, that's group 2. And then group 3, teams that made the playoffs. And then there's a lottery amongst each of those 3 groups to determine the order amongst those 3 groups, a weighted lottery based on how poorly you finished. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Teams will have a chance to essentially, like you said, bid on Brandon Sorsby based on their 2027 NFL draft capital. And a lot of folks don't see this. While Jeremy Fowler of ESPN reported last night or early this morning, there are some executives talking about maybe a second round pick being used on Sorsby. Most people think nobody's going any higher than a third. There is a lot of risk involved in this because A, you got to hope Sorsby has his act together, and B, you got to hope Sorsby proves he can actually be an NFL quarterback. So anything more than a third round pick might be too rich for teams, short of a handful who, let's be honest, are in very poor quarterback states right now. And Kenny, I'm going to bring you in now because you listed the 3 teams that I think make the most sense based on where they're at quarterback position, depth chart wise, to put in a possible bid for Brendan Sorsby. And it feels like the usual suspects, none of which are surprising.
Yeah, so the 3 teams I pegged were Arizona, the Jets, and the Cleveland Browns. You could throw Miami and Atlanta in there, but I think I think we should all give Malik Willis and Tua and Penix a fair chance there. But with the Jets, you got Geno Smith. I mean, where is that going to go? And then you've got Klubnik and Brady Cook behind that. I think that would be an opportunity for Sorsby there. And then in Arizona, you've got Brissett, Beck, and Minshew, another parade of bad quarterbacks. And then in Cleveland, it's the same thing with Watson, Shedeur, and Dylan Gabriel. So, yeah, it would be a heavy quarterback room, but it would give Sorsby an opportunity to maybe play as early as possible. But in any other situation in the NFL, he would probably just ride the bench, be a 3rd stringer or a 4th stringer. So that's probably what he would end up being in this case, but he could probably work his way up in the depth chart pretty fast, given those names of those teams' quarterbacks. So,
all right, before I allow Bill to give me the shakes about this process, being that I have been born and raised a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I am going to throw out the wild but not altogether impossible probability that there's probably a 0.01% chance that the Jets, having 3 first-round picks next year, could do something very Jetsian and bid a first-round pick for Brendan Sorsby. I wouldn't think that's likely, but again, it's the Jets, and they've done Jetsy things before, and they'll do Jetsy things again. And as Kenny mentioned, we're talking Geno, we're talking Cade Klubnik, we're talking Brady Cook, so who knows what the hell their quarterback room is going to look like a year from now, much less just a couple of months from now. Bill, you threw out the other thing that's been bounced around by some folks, which is, all right, the Steelers have an expiration date on their quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is going to be 43 in December. And yes, they've got Will Howard. Yes, they drafted Drew Aller. But what the hell, if we're going to throw as many quarterbacks as we can at the wall and see which one sticks, why not Sorsby?
Yeah, look, I think Pittsburgh makes a ton of sense, but I mean, you're there and you tell me, would the Rooneys, because there are a lot of owners that aren't going to go down this road. And again, I am not saying that Brendan Sorsby is a bad guy or anything. He clearly has an issue. But if Brendan Sorsby makes gambling mistakes at the NFL level, it's going to be a black eye for whatever team took him. There is risk involved. So I ask you, Chris Mack, would the Rooneys even entertain the idea of having him on their football franchise?
I think knowing why the Rooneys hired Mike McCarthy, which is they are desperate to find their next quarterback, it is something they would consider had they not just spent a 3rd-round pick on Drew Aller and now have to figure out this odd game of quarterback musical chairs before week 1 of the regular season and how they're going to hold on to the 2 young developmental quarterbacks, Howard and Aller, while also having a legitimate veteran backup just in case, if and when Aaron Rodgers looks like he's 42, 43 and should miss a week or two. So you've got to keep Rudolph around. I think if they weren't already juggling all of those balls, they would consider it. But I think it takes it off the table for the Steelers. I could be proven wrong, but at this point, I wouldn't think so. And I don't think they'd go more than like a 4th-round pick max for Sorsby. So I think that takes them out of the running. Tyler says he has an idea of a good team that would make sense for Sorsby in the supplemental draft. So since we've got the whole gang here, Tyler, I'm going to bring you in now as well. Who is this mystery team, this good team that you think makes sense for Sorsby in the supplemental draft?
All right, hear me out here. Their quarterback's old. He's about to turn 33. He's probably not going to age the best. Sorsby can sit behind him for a little bit. How about the Detroit Lions? They're not going to have been in a position to draft a quarterback for the next 2 to 3 years. This is probably their best chance. I don't think like the Jets, the Cardinals, I don't think any of these teams should take him because they're just going to be bad by default, and they're going to have better options next year. And I know Kenny says he's 33 old. For Jared Goff, 33 is old. he can't move to begin with right now, and he's probably going to age very poorly. You take Sorsby behind there with Dan Campbell, who's a very good leader, could probably whip him into shape. They don't have a backup quarterback to begin with. Their backup's Teddy Bridgewater. So if the Lions there, maybe the third, fourth round pick, I think that'd be a perfect spot for him. I don't think any of these bad teams should take him. Just suck and wait for the better options next year.
Yeah, that's the other part of this, Bill, is that, and you brought it up a couple minutes ago, the value on quarterbacks in the 2027 NFL draft. Now, granted, we all thought the 2026 NFL draft was going to be great for quarterbacks a year ago at this time. And then it was a complete dud, other than Mendoza. So maybe the 2027 quarterback draft falls apart as well, but teams are not banking on that. They are betting on 2027 being a good year for a quarterback draft. Maybe teams aren't willing to go this route with Sorsby because of that, but Tyler does think, I think, make a good case for a team that's not necessarily looking for the next guy right now and doesn't foresee themselves being in position to draft high in the first round anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think that absolutely is going to play into it. And I think, I think Detroit does make a lot of sense for getting that developmental guy behind a veteran quarterback. I think Minnesota, you've got the quarterback whisperer and Kevin O'Connell. Like, let him be third string this year behind Murray and J.J. McCarthy, and you're not, you have an opening to potentially have a quarterback there. I think you could even look at teams that have, like, a really smart GMs and have really good, I know the Eagles were bumpy. I made a joke about Jalen Hurts, but, like, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, can you bring in Brendan Sorsby? And if you're Howie Roseman, he's always trying to play 4D chess in the draft. Can he get him for a fourth round supplemental pick this year, and then in 2 years move him for a second round pick, which is going to be a win for Howie, like those kind of things. So I think there's a lot of things that play into this. And the question is just like, how much of the 2027 draft are you willing to give up? Are you willing to dip into that day 2 pick? If so, round 2, round 2 for a guy that has this kind of background, I think is probably going to be too risky. But Chris, like, I know hindsight's 2020. If you're the LA Rams right now, and this is now played out the way it has, would you rather give up a 2027 3 and have Brendan Sorsby as your developmental guy behind Matthew Stafford, and then have used that 13th overall pick on Mekhi Lemon or Kenyon Sadiq or something like that? Is that the better move for the Rams now? We know Sean McVay claims he wasn't upset, but we have that whole thing going on there. Would that maybe have been more sense, with hindsight being 2020, helping this team and still getting your guy who a lot of people said was going to be better than Ty Simpson if he had come out in the draft anyway? He would have been QB2. So I think there's a lot of interesting angles here.
Yeah, you know how I feel about Ty Simpson, Bill, so that's a trick question. You're trying to get me to step on the Ty Simpson landmine. I appreciate the work there. Yeah, absolutely. You'd much rather spend a future fourth round pick or even third rounder, because we know how the Rams feel about draft picks in general, let alone mid to late round picks. You'd absolutely jump on Brendan Sorsby for a supplemental pick this year, giving up a depth pick next year, and say, okay, just settle yourself on the roster. We're not counting on you to do anything right now other than get your life together and get up to NFL speed at practice and in the classroom. So that would have made a ton of sense. All right, I'm going to put it to everybody. You've got to make a prediction. You've got to make a prediction about where Sorsby goes and at what cost. Bill, I'll start with you. Give me a team and a round where Sorsby goes in the supplemental draft.
You're going to put me on the spot first. All right.
Yep.
I am going to say that it's not going to be one of these bad franchises, because they're banking on these 2027 first round picks. So I'm going to say it's not the Cardinals, it's not the Jets, it's any of those type of teams. I am going to say, Chris, based on how you were kind of saying this, that it's not going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know how they would protect him unless they can put him on some sort of non-active list with 4 quarterbacks. So I think it's going to be a good team, not a great team. I'm going to go with a team I brought up briefly to Kenny. I'm going to say, I don't know if it was on air or off air, the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Atlanta Falcons, they've got concerns about Penix. Tua is just a Band-Aid. They don't have a future. I'm going to say the Atlanta Falcons do it, and I'm going to say teams get cold feet. It's going to be a 4th round pick.
All right, Atlanta with a 4th, Bill says, for Sorsby. Kenny, Who you got?
Yeah, I was going to say, can I say no team? Because this is very complicated, and I feel like everyone's just going to pass on him. Is that an answer?
That could be an answer.
Yeah, I mean, he could.
That's what
if he doesn't get taken. Yeah, if he doesn't get taken in the supplemental draft, then he just becomes an undrafted free agent, and anybody can sign him. And that, I think, that's not being considered as much as it should within the realm of possibility, given everything that's gone on with Sorsby over the last few weeks and months, and now going back years that we know everything we know of. Tyler, are you going to stick with your Lions selection here?
I want to, but if you told me like to make a betting market on where Sorsby's going to go, I actually think the favorite would be the Cleveland Browns. So I'll go to the Cleveland Browns at the third round. They just cut Dylan Gabriel in training camp.
Look, it's the Browns. They're forever in search of a quarterback, adding another one to the mix. They're, like we talked about, throwing quarterbacks at the wall to see who sticks. I'm going to go off the board just a little bit with a team that we didn't bring up, but a team that may find itself in quarterback purgatory a year from now. Not a bad team, not necessarily a good team either, but a borderline playoff team, especially in their division. Tampa Bay Bucks with a 4th-round pick. Draft Brendan Sorsby, get him into the program, have him waiting in the wings. If you can't work things out with Baker Mayfield, he goes off in free agency, and you give him an opportunity because the rest of their quarterback depth chart is a disaster. Jake Browning, Connor Bazelak, Jalen Daniels. So I'll say the Bucks with a 4th-round pick, but it truly is. We talk about how college football is the wild, wild west now. The supplemental draft is kind of like the wild, wild west. You have people literally trying to figure out how it works in the moment as we get ready for it. And Brendan Sorsby now deciding to enter the 2026 NFL supplemental draft. We'll see how it all plays out. Certainly, I'm sure we'll find out more as we get closer to when it actually goes down later this summer. Summertime, also time for the NHL offseason. We've got Stanley Cup champs for the first time in 20 years. It's the Carolina Hurricanes. What is replicable about their success that the rest of the league may try to copy as soon as the next few weeks with free agency and the draft looming? We'll talk to Dennis Bernstein of SiriusXM NHL Radio about it next here on Westwood One Sports.
What a first period for the 27-year-old.
There's the two stops. Hurdle and Stone taken away. Stone's right on the doorstep. Left pad, right body, right arm. Somehow keeps it out. And then at the end, it's Dorofeev. If he can really shoot it. And much like Carter Hart had to dive like a shortstop to take one away, Bussy does the same thing.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
Ray Ferraro and Sean McDonough with another huge Brandon Bussey save as the Carolina Hurricanes capture the Stanley Cup. Brandon Bussey, our Defensive Player of the Week, sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union, proudly serving all branches of the armed services, veterans, and their families. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Our members are the mission. Carolina Hurricanes win their first Stanley Cup in 2 decades. The last time they won one in 2006. Their current head coach was their then captain. He still is jacked now as he was then, as we saw from the footage of the celebratory locker room. Rod Brindamore here to talk about all of it, what we saw in the Stanley Cup final, what may be replicable for other teams now as the NHL draft sits just 10 days away, and free agency shortly after that. Is Dennis Bernstein of the Fourth Period and Sirius XM NHL Radio. Morning, Dennis. How are you, my friend?
Doing great, Chris. Happy to recap the Cup final with you and then look forward as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I saw on social media and in some of the analysis of the Cup final and the Canes run in particular was just the impact that Brandon Bussey had being inserted when he was. And that part is indisputable. They needed somebody to step up and take control between the pipes at that point. But I think what got lost on some folks is just the fact that I don't want to say it didn't matter who the goaltender was. Again, that takes away from the way Bussey played. But because of the way Carolina played all year, especially over the last 2 months, their system, and it's again not to take away from any of the star players, the Conn Smythe Trophy that Jordan Stahl won, their system is what made them so dominant in the playoffs and got them past Vegas in 6 games.
Yeah, just a quick recap on why Bussey was in. Now it's come out that Freddie Anderson had a knee injury, so it wasn't as big as a risk. It was almost like they had to go to Bussey. But to your point, Chris, like Carolina didn't beat Vegas with chaos. They suffocated them. When you win 3-0 in a cup clinching game, that says everything to me. It's not stealing a game. That's walking into the arena, taking the air out of the building, and ending the series on their terms. That's what happened. Certainly in games 5 and 6, they just imposed their will. And you could talk about systems, but you do need good players to execute an excellent system. So a lot of it was system. Bussey was incredible. What a great story. He goes into, the Carolina Hurricanes lore now back 20 years ago, like Cam Ward did, with a performance that I think maybe is a little undersold. You can say, yeah, it's a system. But Bussey, as you mentioned, as you heard on the replay, he's a much more athletic goaltender than Freddie Anderson. And I think that Vegas adjusted to that and started overpassing. You saw a lot of guys having opportunities. They're passing the other guy because Bussey would explode out of the crease. But it was a great story, and the best team did win in 6 games.
Yeah, Carolina dominant again throughout the entire postseason. Went up against the stiff test in Vegas in the Cup final, Dennis. What I mean by system is not to, like I said, not to downplay the contributions of specific players, because like you said, you need the right players to play that system. It's that we saw, like you said, the smothering effect of a good, heavy forecheck and Carolina's size and Carolina's ability to play what we call a 200-foot game, not just on the back end, but to, if they had to, chip and chase, get the puck behind the Vegas defense, and then just wear them down. Their size played a part in this as well, I think. And what did you see from the way they stayed consistent with how they played the game for the last 2 months?
Yeah, well, 16-3 in the playoffs is dominant. Like, no matter what sport, Chris, right? I mean, the Knicks had a run that was comparable as well, right? And when you talk about systems, the guy who won the Cup as the most valuable player of the playoffs was Jordan Stahl. Beginning of the Cup final, nobody had Jordan Stahl winning it. It was Mitch Marner, it was Freddie Anderson. Nobody did. So it is a lot about system because you had a guy who emerged, right, in the final. And Jordan Stahl, he won the trophy, and he should win the trophy. He had played great defense as well. But there were other guys on his team, like Taylor Hall, like Logan Stankoven. You could even talk about some of their defensive players, like, Condre Miller had a great series, and so did a couple of other players. So it was about that, but they got to the game in game 4 for me, even though they lost the game in double overtime. Right, that was the key game, because it got to them saying, and it was game 3 actually when Warner got the hat trick. It said to Carolina, we might not be the most gifted offensive team, and we don't have Jack Eichel or Mitch Marner, but we can get to these guys if we stay patient. We stay with our offense, and you saw that. And then Carter Hart started to fade, and I think that an older team in Vegas, who's a heavier team, their legs got heavy. Chris, I was in the building game 6. Vegas looked like they were out of gas. And not mentally, but physically. They just couldn't stay up with the intensity and the forecheck of Carolina and their speed. And it wound up, they couldn't produce any effort. For a team that we talked about offense all playoffs with Vegas Golden Knights, how they won games, they get shut out at home. I think that tells the story of where Vegas was in game 6.
Dennis Bernstein of Sirius XM NHL Radio and the fourth period with us here on Westwood One Sports. To put a button on the Hurricanes' run, Dennis, what do you think is replicable? Because this is what happens in every sport at the end of every season. Everybody tries to find a way to replicate what the champs just did. What is replicable around the NHL for teams that consider themselves close from what Carolina did?
Well, speed, pace. You have to be fast. You have to skate fast. You have to play at pace, I think, to win championships. Vegas isn't a pace team, but they didn't win the championship. They looked old and they looked slow in the last couple of games. So I think that's replicable. Now, they could say that, well, Carolina doesn't take a lot of big swings. They're not aggressive, front office. It's basically the same guys have failed over and over again, and they finally broke through. That's not true, Chris. If you go back 2 seasons, they swapped out 13 players. They swapped out 4 of the 6. They took gambles on guys that might be out of favor, like Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall was a healthy scratch in Chicago back a year ago when they played in Vancouver. I'm sure that was a blow for him. They took a risk on that. They took when the big trade for Rantanen didn't work. They took a risk on a Logan Stankoven, who's the opposite. He's 5'7" and maybe 195. And the other thing is that, yes, you need size. It's great, but you're starting to look at scouts have to look at players different. It's not just about size, because you look at a Hudson on Montreal. You look at Stankoven, who's a smaller player. You look at Seth Jarvis, who's a smaller player. This isn't an overwhelming. They have some size on the blue line a little bit, but not up front. Like they aren't a big team, so it's not necessarily all right. The biggest and baddest team is going to win a cup. I think the way you look at how you build a championship team, where undersized players who are very skilled and speedy that can fit into a system, that's what you have to look for. You have to establish your core. And then, Chris, as a general manager, you have to decide what type of style of play is going to work. I think more and more you're seeing the Carolina style start to work, as opposed to the all-in style of Vegas, who said, we're just going to go out, get the best players, and try to find a way and try to find a system to win a championship.
When you look at what Jordan Stahl did, winning the Conn Smythe, scoring a goal in each game of the Stanley Cup final the way he did, or the first 5 games at least, and you look back, this is selfishly as a guy who grew up a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, you look back at the fact that organization, when Ray Shero was the general manager, drafted Evgeny Malkin, Sidney Crosby, and Jordan Stahl in first rounds in consecutive years, all 3 guys going on to win Conn Smythe trophies and multiple Stanley Cups. Stahl's second cup obviously coming in Carolina. Is it still possible to build teams that way in the NHL? I know that was an unlikely streak of luck that the Penguins had in the middle of that organization building run, but is it still possible to stack up talent the way that they did years ago, or is it increasingly hard to do in a league where there's more parity than ever?
It's a yes or no answer, Chris. Here's the deal. You can look at a team like Anaheim that broke through last year, and you look at up front what they have. They have really, they traded for Gauthier, but they drafted Carlson. They drafted McTavish second overall. They got Jackson Lacombe in the second round. And you say, wow, this is a way to go. They took some swings here with free agents, older free agents like Cologne and Trouba, but this is the way to go. Except for one thing, Chris. It took 7 seasons for the Anaheim Ducks to make the playoffs doing it that way. If you want to be patient as an organization, as a fan base, to say it's going to take the better part of a decade to build a team like this, then go do it. That's fine. Same thing with San Jose. Now, what was the best move that Mike Grier had? He won the lottery and got Celebrini. But they didn't make the playoffs, Chris, and it might take another couple of years for Grier to build the defense around him and have the right parts up front to support Macklin Celebrini. And they've been out of the playoffs for a very long time as well. So you can do it. You want to take 10 years to do it? And in 2026, when winning is supreme and you swap out coaches all the time, you can't keep blaming the coach, Chris. A lot of times it falls on the coach. But when you look at what these coming teams, how long it took, yeah, you can do it. But I think the way to do it now, it won't be through free agencies. Because guess what? Because everybody lauded the salary cap going up. It's great for the players. Except now everybody stays home. So July 1st, free agency is going to be a buster from a media standpoint. It's not going to be any good. You're going to have to trade your way to it. And I'm a Rams fan, so I can say it. In 2021, what did my guys say? I'm trading all the picks. I'm going for it. You're going to have to give up some of your future, Chris, and once you establish your core to establish a championship team, I think, going forward in the NHL.
So I'm glad you brought it up that way, because the first overall pick this year in the draft belongs to the Maple Leafs. Perhaps one of the most impatient fan bases, if not the most impatient fan base in the NHL. And they see Mitch Marner go off to Vegas and have the best postseason of his career. They see that they've got the first pick, and it could be Gavin McKenna, but you're going to have to sit and wait for that to develop. And there's also plenty of Maple Leafs fans who look at Austin Matthews and ask themselves, is this the guy we want to build around, or are we willing to take that step back and, like you talk about, start the build out a few more years down the road? What do you think the future is for the Leafs, and in particular Austin Matthews? Can they bring that back together from where they were, say, 3-4 months ago?
Well, all the fans in Toronto right now are celebrating that Mitch Marner didn't win the Stanley Cup and didn't win the Conn Smythe. That's their celebration. I guess that's a parade today, if there's going to be a parade in Toronto. Austin Matthews is committed to winning there. He said it publicly. He's come out. So I'm keeping that guy there. Where they get a break with Gavin McKenna, assuming that's the pick, look, he may not be a generational player like Celebrini or Connor McDavid, but he's a top 6 forward. So what do they get? For 3 seasons, they get a top 6 forward at a minimum salary deal. So that means that Matthew Knies, who's a really good player who they thought about trading maybe, they can hold on to him because now you've filled the spot. You didn't fill Mitch Marner's spot with Gavin McKenna, but you got cap space you can play with and go out and play in the market, maybe get your defense better. So I don't think they're as bad off as people want to say. Now they got to decide on a coach. And I know the front office, they're trying to do things differently, Chris, but they've actually stated they've talked to over 50 people for the coaching job. Chris, I got news for you. There's not 50 people out that aren't coaching in the NHL that can coach in the NHL today. So I don't know who they're talking to. Maybe they're talking to decorators about changing the drapes in the office of the president or something like that. But they have to settle on a coach. They have to settle on a style of play. I think there's enough talent there, certainly up front, to go deep in the playoffs. The Blue Lions know the story and have to decide what they want to do with goaltending. So I don't think it's as grave a situation. I don't think they're going to regress that much because there's still a lot of talent, and Austin has made the commitment. You still have Tavares there. You still have Willie leaning under there. And if you add a really good player like Gavin McKenna, you've got 4 legitimate scorers in the top 6. So, but they still have to make the right moves. They have to supplement their defense. They have to decide on the style of playing a coach. So there's a lot of work to do for the new GM that's in place there.
Dennis Bernstein of SiriusXM NHL Radio and the Fourth Period with us here on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos here on You Better You Bet. You can follow Dennis on X at DennisTFP. As we look ahead towards free agency, I know you alluded toward it already, Dennis, because of the dramatic rising of the cap and this also being a bit of a down year for the free agency crop that's out there. How do you see this playing out? You mentioned trades. If teams want to be aggressive in remaking their rosters this offseason, it's going to require some wheeling and dealing. When you look at the GMs around the league who've prided themselves on that part of their work, are there teams that you would look at this offseason, whether it be between cap space, trade assets, whatever they may have, that can go from, okay, we were right there in the conversation this year, maybe borderline playoff teams or out in the first round, who could take a big step forward this offseason?
Well, there's clearly one GM that has the most pressure on him with anybody. His name is Stan Bowman. He works at Edmonton. He's hiring a coach that the first move you have to make to hire the coach is put him under investigation. You hear that clock? You hear that ticking, Chris? That's Connor McDavid's contract. He's up in 2 years. Right now, Darnell Nurse is going to get traded or wants to be traded. So there's trade rumors about that. The other guy is, and it's funny, players are starting to get more power. Who's the other guy that's up against it right now? Steve Yzerman, your homegrown from Michigan captain, who's been all in for years to win, wants to be traded. Wow, that's a tough one. That's a real, and I know the Illich family loves Steve Yzerman, but he's been there for what, a decade? They haven't made the playoffs. They brought in a really good coach in Todd McClellan. Those two teams are under a tremendous amount of pressure. I think in Anaheim, they know they're coming. They got it. And they have 3 unrestricted free agents on the defense that aren't coming back next season. Trouba, Gudis, and I forget the third one. But John Carlson, so they have to redo their defense. But I think Edmonton and Detroit, you look at teams where their expectations are very high. Certainly, there's nothing higher than in Edmonton. I think the most pressure's on Stan Bowman, but you're going to have to trade. And I wouldn't be surprised, Chris, if you start seeing last year with St. Louis, maybe offer sheets, where I'll give an example, a guy like Dorofiev in Vegas. He's going to get a bit of contract because he played so well in the playoffs. He was a 40-goal scorer. Like maybe a team steps up like St. Louis did last year with Edmonton and throws them a lot of money, and they have to make a decision. So I think those are the two ways, because free agency, other than if you want a really good winger in Alex Tuck and maybe a high-scoring defenseman who's 30 years old and Darren Radish coming out of Tampa, there's just supplemental pieces. There's not game-changing pieces in free agency, so you're going to have to go other routes. So if it's either trades or drafting, develop, or offer sheets, I think that's the way you can improve your teams much more quicker than what the free agency pool will have this summer.
Great stuff, Dennis. Appreciate the insight. Enjoy your summer, and we'll talk again soon.
It was a pleasure, Chris. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Check out Dennis, as I mentioned, on X at Dennis TFP, the fourth period, and of course, Sirius XM NHL radio. Yeah, that's the one thing. If you're a hockey fan, maybe you're aware of it already, but it is going to be a very different offseason, I think, than anything in recent memory, where you're used to, okay, these teams are going to improve in the draft or take a swing at it. Everybody else is going to hit free agency. There might be some really big deals that take place this offseason. And there are definitely places like Edmonton where, again, you're trying to bring in Mike Babcock. Is that the right prescription in the final few years of Connor McDavid's contract, as Dennis mentioned, when you've got to find success finally and break through to a Stanley Cup victory? Getting to the Cup final, getting to the conference finals, not nearly enough for Oilers fans, given what they have on that roster. We've gone NHL wrap up to the season, turning the page to the offseason. We've got NBA end of the season, turning the page to the offseason. We've put Brendan Sorsby in a couple different spots with the supplemental draft. We've previewed the U.S. Open. So much. We wrap it all up with our 3 favorite moments of the show, our 3 stars, a couple bets for you for tonight as well. All next here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Welcome back to You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Our three favorite moments of the day coming up in just a moment. We call them our 3 stars of the day. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos here on You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM. It is Westwood One Sports. Black and Abdallah up in just a few moments. There is a lot going. I know you think it's summertime and there's not a lot going on, but there's a lot of baseball, both of the major league variety. There's College World Series, which I'll get to in just a second. And yes, we've got the end of the NBA and NHL seasons, but their off seasons are literally right around the corner. Like the NBA draft is a week from now, the NHL draft 10 days from now, free agency in both leagues right around the corner after that. We got the U.S. Open this weekend. If you missed anything that we talked about, by the way, both in turning the page in the NHL and NBA or getting ready for the U.S. Open, Dennis Bernstein, Brian Geltzeiler, Jason Sobel, all on today's show. All of our Brendan Sorsby discussion as well, where he could end up, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Inside that Odyssey app, you can always rewind on Westwood One Sports. And of course, the Westwood One Sports app with you wherever you're going, whatever you're doing. Live across North America, we're on Sirius XM channel 375 as well. 4 footy matches today. 4, if you count the one that starts at midnight Eastern, 9 Pacific. So, if you're looking to get in on the fun, starting as soon as 3 hours from now when it's France against Senegal, use today's no sweat goal scorer token on a qualifying anytime first or last goal scorer wager during the World's game, and you'll get bonus bets if you don't win. So, give sweating your bets the boot with BetMGM. Download the BetMGM app and please gamble responsibly. Like Argentina plays tonight, 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific. They're playing Algeria. I mean, are we not going to bet Lionel Messi to score an anytime goal? He's minus 115. Come on. I personally will be dropping that one in the bucket a little bit later. Also, I do have an eye towards the College World Series. I've mentioned this before because while I am a Penn State guy, West Virginia University is right down the road for me, like literally an hour and 15 minutes door to door from my house to West Virginia University. So I do like to see the Mountaineers do well. Also, they've got an elimination game today against Troy, a rematch of their first game earlier in the week out in Omaha. Heavy favorites, minus 235 at BetMGM, but I'm on West by God, Virginia. Country roads, baby. Also, the nightcap, the second elimination game in Omaha today in the College World Series, just light up the scoreboard. Douse it in kerosene early on and then just flick a match and watch the scoreboard burn because Texas and Georgia, maybe the 2 best offensive teams in this tournament, left in this tournament. The total is posted at 14.5. Okay, let's go over. Let's do it. Parlay both of those. You could get plus 185, WVU money line, and over on Texas, Georgia. Again, just what I'm doing. You can choose to tail. You can choose to fade. Do whatever you wish. It's all waiting for you inside the BetMGM app. Let's wrap up the show, give you our 3 favorite moments of the day with our 3 stars.
3.
There's clearly one GM that has the most pressure on him with anybody. His name is Stan Bowman. He works at Edmonton. He's hiring a coach that the first move you have to make to hire the coach is put him under investigation. You hear that clock? You hear that ticking, Chris? That's Connor McDavid's contract. It's up in 2 years.
Dennis Bernstein of the Fourth Period and Sirius XM NHL Radio just a few moments ago. It's a great point. You need to win a cup in the next year or 2, or else you don't know what it's going to look like. And you bring in Mike Babcock? Yeah, he got results years ago. But is that the guy that you're going to count on to get the best out of Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers? We'll see how that turns out up north of the border. Our second star of the day.
2.
Won 3 times on the PGA Tour this year, the only 3-time winner. He was runner-up last week in Canada. He's won a U.S. Open in the past, just 4 years ago at Brookline. Does it guarantee that Matt Fitzpatrick is going to win or even contend for this title? Of course not. That said, he kind of ticks all the boxes that we're looking for.
Matt Fitzpatrick to win the U.S. Open at Shinnecock this weekend? Jason Sobel of BetMGM.com, CBS Sports HQ, and SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio earlier in the show, making a case for the guy who's won more than anybody else on the tour this year and saying, yeah, why not Matt Fitzpatrick? I can't wait to see how the course plays as much as anything else. Finally, our number one star of the day.
The Celtics are much more viable in this than I think anyone wants to let on. Just because here's the thing for Milwaukee, they'll get some Celtics picks, but they know that they can flip Jaylen Brown in a Giannis deal and get a whole lot of what they want out on the open market.
Brian Geltzeiler of SiriusXM NBA Radio earlier talking about the dynamics of a Giannis Antetokounmpo to Boston deal, sending Jaylen Brown back to Milwaukee, and then what the Bucks do to flip Jaylen Brown if they look for a third team. And at that point, you start to look around and ask yourself, okay, where does Jaylen Brown land? And how much sense does this make for Boston? Is bailing on Jaylen Brown in favor of bringing in Giannis Antetokounmpo, is that the right move? I'll be honest, I look at it and ask myself, look, Jason Tatum, when he's on, one of the handful of the best players in the NBA. That's indisputable. But when he's not on, and if the injury concerns become regular, I don't know. I just don't know if I'd be willing to put all my eggs in the Jason Tatum basket. I know if you're being asked to break up the duo of Tatum and Brown in order to get Giannis, most teams are going to give up Brown. I don't know if I'd be so quick to pull that trigger. I don't know if it would be worth it to me if I were the Boston Celtics and Brad Stevens to make that move. I'd have to think long and hard about making that move for Giannis Antetokounmpo. But fascinating what the ripple effect could be based on who that third team could be. Great stuff. If you missed any of it, that's why you got the podcast. Search You Better You Bet wherever you get your podcasts. Nick is back tomorrow. I'll be back in for him later in the week. Thanks to all the boys in the crew for keeping us on the rails today. Bleck and Abdallah up next right here on Westwood One Sports.